Hello, everyone. We're going to go ahead and begin this morning. My name is Lindsay Baca, and I'm excited to introduce Kai Karou, who will be leading our session, Ignite Learning with Mathematical Discourse. As Senior Director of Product and Content for Mind Research Institute, Kai Karou leads a team of learning and game designers, artists, and mathematicians developing the next generation of STMath's interactive programs. Kai has been designing neuroscience-driven edtech solutions for over a decade. Prior to joining Mind, he founded Beyond Math, an education company focused on teaching math in unique and non-traditional ways. Kai has spoken at South by Southwest EDU and written articles published in Huffington Post. He has a bachelor's in engineering from the University of California, Berkeley. Kai, I am now passing the mic to you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Lindsay. Well, it's a pleasure to be with you all here today. I hope you had a great first opening keynote session, and we're going to have a lot of fun today. Today's going to be an interactive session, so get ready to interact, think, and geek out on math. A few years ago, we were asking the question to ourselves of what if there was an easy button solution for getting kids to talk about math? And what if with this solution, it required almost zero prep and was super seamless to introduce in the classroom? So this is what you will learn about today. We're going to go into the foundations of mathematical discourse, as well as Puzzle Talks, a very effective tool for invoking mathematical discourse in the classroom. So to kick off the topic of mathematical discourse, one of the things that I personally think about is that this idea of actually talking in math class is relatively new. So if you think about the origins of math class, and probably many of our math experiences here, math used to be a classroom where the teacher was writing on the chalkboard, kids were sitting and listening, they were taking notes, and there was virtually no discussion happening on the student's end. Now you fast forward to today, and you've got things like number talks. We've got the 5 practices, which are all about engaging in discourse. Even the standards of mathematical practice have an entire practice focused around constructing viable arguments and critiquing the reasoning of others. Even on the assessments, the state assessments, there's actually sections now on communication and reasoning. So clearly there's agreement among math educators that discussing math in class is important. But I want to ask you a question, why? So why is it important for students to be talking about math? I'd like you to go open up the chat, type into the chat why you think it's important for students to talk about math. All right, we're starting to have a few responses come in. Let's see, helps them process the information. Oh, quite a few popping in. Helps them process the information they just read. So processing, also learning from others is part of that. We've got students doing the talking. So part of the learning is actually doing the talking, gaining new understanding. Yep. So a lot from others, learning from other students is a key part of that. Students can hear in other ways. So you're learning different methods or different modes of problem solving via discussing aspects, connecting what they've learned to the real world, using processes, clarifying understanding. Great. So I'm hearing a lot of building deeper connections, learning from others, having to articulate your thinking in order to hear different strategies. Now, as you all know, Mind Education is a neuroscience-based organization. We've been studying how the brain learns for the last over 2 decades. And there actually is, all of these reasons are accurate, and there actually is a neuroscience foundation for why talking about math is important in class. And it's very simple. If you want to engage a student in whole brain learning, there are areas of the brain, specifically the Broca's and Wernicke's areas, that are associated with language and with academic discourse. And if students aren't engaging in language, it means these areas aren't going to be firing, in which there's part of your brain that's not firing in discourse around mathematics. Now, there's actually a very important point here. When we engage in discourse in our brain, we don't actually have to necessarily speak that out loud. So when we are thinking in our head and using words in our head, even if we're not articulating it, we're actually still going to be firing these areas. But this is the foundation. It's activating and deepening these connections. And one of the key things that happens, and some of you all mentioned this in the chat, is that when we do engage in discourse, one of the foundational aspects is actually increasing our sense making, right? It's one thing when you have to solve a problem yourself, but when you actually have to explain how you solve the problem and explain your thinking and explain your reasoning, that creates a whole deeper level of understanding of that topic area. So if this is something that we know and we all agree is so important, take a guess, how long does the average student talk during, and this is not just math, this is a 1 hour lesson. And this research was done by an organization we were looking at partnering with that actually measures audio in the classroom and can track all of the conversations and audio that is occurring. So go ahead and type into the chat your guess of how long, based on this organization's research, does the average student talk during a 1 hour lesson. And this is, again, across the nation, across subjects. All right, we're seeing a variety of responses here, everywhere from seconds to 10 minutes to 6 minutes to 30 seconds to 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 2 minutes, 15 minutes, all across the range. So again, this is specifically research based on 10,000 students done by this organization. And what they found by putting a recorder and tracking who's talking in class is that the amount of time the average student spoke was 27 seconds, which I'm sure you all are having the same reaction as me. When I first heard this was shocking. But let's have a conversation now, and let's talk a little bit about, and we're going to talk about this with the scope of math, is obviously if students are talking so little, they're challenging with getting kids talking. Why is it challenging? What's challenging about it to get students talking about math in class? Why is it challenging to get students talking and specifically talking about math? And I think I'm seeing a lot of folks in the chat were interested in that study. It is across K-12, and the organization's name was TeachFX, and they measure audio during classrooms. Okay, let's see. Why is it tricky to get kids talking? Yeah, so a lot of teachers don't really care about students thinking, just looking for the answers. Kids might be afraid to talk. You know, I know for my younger daughter, talking in front of the whole class is a little bit more uncomfortable for her. Yeah, you've got people feeling like they can't do math. Teachers doing most of the instructing. There's that aspect where you feel like, gosh, I need to teach in order for the learning to happen, right? Rather than having the discourse happen. So knowing good questions to ask is a really important aspect. There's still a lot of teachers believing that, yeah, standing and preaching. So maybe teachers aren't bought into the idea of getting kids to talk. So one of the things that we've talked about when looking at this is one of the challenges for getting students to talk is that they actually have to have something that's interesting, engaging for them to engage in discourse about. The key to get students to talk is starts with having something interesting to talk about. So having something that, one, is accessible, two, that they can clearly understand. You know, it's not a problem they don't understand. It's a problem they can clearly understand. Three, it's engaging, and especially if it's something that's doable and relatable to them. And this is where, when developing our puzzle talks, this is where we found, gosh, our puzzle talks just have this sweet spot because kids love Gigi, and surprise or not, kids love talking about Gigi and noticing what's on the Gigi screen. So this was the birthing of Puzzle Talks. Puzzle Talks have been around for a long time. They've been in different forms. This last year, we created an entire new form, which I'm sure many of you have been exposed to already. Just to talk about what a Puzzle Talk is, it really is a short teacher-facilitated lesson. So it's designed to engage students in problem solving and encourage math discourse using our ST Math puzzles. It can be used in a variety of ways. Some folks like to use this just like a number talk or like any other math routine that you're going to introduce throughout the week. Some will use it as a way to launch into a lesson or a new topic. It has a really broad and wise use. Before I jump in and start diving into some of these puzzle talks, I'd love to get a sense from the audience, how familiar are you with puzzle talks? So if you've never heard of them, type in never heard of them. If you've heard of them but never really used them, you can type that in. If you've used them once or twice, type that in. If you use them all the time, I'd just like to get a sense of where folks are at. Okay, heard of them but never used them, maybe a few times, never. Some folks that love them, some folks that use them often. So we've got a broad range, which is what I would expect. And so what I'm going to do is actually dive into some of my favorite puzzle talks. So even folks that have used puzzle talks, perhaps you haven't seen some of these. So let me jump back to, I'm going to actually jump over here. And this screen, so for those that have never used our puzzle talks, if you click on the curriculum menu, and you will see a list, I have a lot more on my list than you will, but you're going to see a button right here that says Puzzle Talks. If you click on this Puzzle Talks link, it is going to take you to a page that looks like this. This is where we've got tons of puzzle talks across kindergarten through 8th grade. You can go ahead and see all of them just by scrolling down right here. I can go ahead and search in the search bar. So let's just say I was looking for something on multiplication. This is going to allow me to see every puzzle talk associated with multiplication across the grades that it covers. Let's say I'm a 3rd grade teacher and I've done multiplication, I've done division, and I'm looking for something that I can do to reinforce these concepts. And so I type in multiplication and I come here and I see, oh, wow, there's a topic on multiplication and division relationships. Let me jump in and check that out. So I'm going to pop in here. I can read the overview right here. So in this lesson, students build an understanding of the relationship between multiplication and division. Okay, great. It's about understanding that relationship. I can see the puzzle if I'm familiar with it. I can gain an understanding of that. I'm going to read the objectives, explore the relationship between multiplication and division. I can actually scroll down and see the puzzles that are included, as well as all of the teacher notes associated with that. For those that want, there are Game in a Minute video links. So if you're not familiar with the puzzle, the Game in a Minute videos can be a fantastic way to get familiar. I can see there's also some materials, but I'm just going to go ahead and jump right in. And this is one of the things I love with puzzle talks is you can just jump right in and start playing around with them. So I'm going to go to the first slide. And here's what I see. Now, I will tell you from doing this with students in classrooms, notice and wonder is such a common phrase and term that is used in order to start engaging students in conversation. It also works wonders with puzzle talks. Oftentimes, when you pull up puzzles, there's going to be many students that are familiar with those puzzles and they love to talk about things that they've already seen. You can ask the class, well, how many of you have seen this puzzle before? And how many of you is this brand new for? When I jump in and I ask kids, what do they notice and what do they wonder about this? They'll start saying, oh, well, I noticed this little monster choppy thing with teeth in it. I noticed that there's some apples. I noticed that there's white apples and there's these little pink things on the ground. If you're not sure also what to ask as a teacher, there's a really wonderful set of questions which are customized to every single puzzle. The detailed questions right now do stay the same, which guide you across how to facilitate a puzzle talk. So I can start by looking at sharing what students see on the screen, what they notice and wonder. Then we're going to shift into having students share what they think and explain their thinking, and then having them try different solutions. So in this case, I would then go in and ask students, and I'll show you all just what happens. Oftentimes, it's hard to know what's going to happen with a puzzle before you play the feedback, so you can go ahead and see what's going to happen. For those that were wondering, we need to feed these little monsters here, and we need to figure out how many apples we need in order to feed this monster. So the next question you may want to ask is, okay, well, how would you go about solving this problem? We'd ask one student to call. A very common strategy that one student will use, and this is where the pen tool can be so helpful in order to annotate students' thinking, is, okay, well, I can see over here, I'll move this over, I can see over here that there's 3 apples for 1 monster. So if I get 3 apples for this monster, and then 3 apples for this monster, and then 3 apples. And again, you can be annotating this on the screen. One of these is we're modeling one of students' strategies for how they're solving this puzzle, which is introducing new strategies. And I can see that that's going to give me about 12 apples. You can ask students, did anyone else solve that in a different way? What's also really neat that I'll show is that you can automatically, when I go out of the pen mode, it hides the drawing, but I actually can pull up the drawing while I'm interacting with the puzzle. And in this case, the 12 was highlighted so well. So I can go ahead and select that. And we can all now pause and look at the feedback and watch the apples. If we weren't sure what happened, the scrub bar is such a fantastic tool for puzzle talks because we can ask our students, what do you see is happening? And what's happening the way the monsters are, or the stamp is basically bringing 3 apples to each monster. And you can use that to help students understand the puzzles as well. So we got this puzzle. What's great is you'll see the puzzles don't just automatically move on, because it's one of the things with puzzle talks is we really want students solving this multiple ways. So we could ask again, what's another way that we solved it? But let's move on to puzzle 2. And let's, again, I'm not really sure what's going on here. So I'm going to look at my discourse questions. And what I see here is now it's making some look-fors around division. And what do I notice that's different about this puzzle? I could ask, what do we notice that's different? And one of the responses might be, well, there's a certain number of apples, and it actually allows me to choose the number of monsters. So you can see what we're doing now is we're flipping the unknown to, rather than being on the apples, it's on the monsters. And now I would ask, okay, after we talk about this, what are some ways that you might go about solving this? So I'd actually like to have everyone here. I'd like to see the range of ways folks are solving this. We're going to test your 3rd grade math skills here. Go ahead and type into the chat, what is your strategy for how you went about solving this puzzle? What's your strategy? Go ahead and type into the chat your strategy for solving this puzzle. All right, we're starting to see some responses come in. And just notice all of the different approaches that folks are taking. So we've got a repeated subtraction approach, starting from 12 and then repeatedly taking away, I'm assuming, 3 apples. We've got grouping apples into 3s. So we can see that the stamp has 3 apples per monster. So if we start grouping into 3s, we can see how many monsters that's going to select. We've got just kind of a skip counting approach. So we can start counting up by 3s. Grouping apples by 3s, groupings, circling until, so fantastic. And again, if we were in the classroom, what we'd do is we'd take a few of these approaches and we'd actually start drawing. I want to show one of the things that's actually really neat and interesting about this puzzle is that you can both, and a lot of folks use this strategy, is you can start by talking about how, okay, well, what we're doing is we have 3 apples per monster. And I've got to figure out how many monsters I have. And so I've got 12 apples. So that means, and again, multiple folks cited this approach where I'm going to start grouping by 3s. And if I group by 3s, that's going to give me then 4. That will give me, again, 4 monsters. What I also saw, though, what's great, and actually no one specifically alluded to this, but I've seen this alluded to specifically in the classroom, is some students will say, well, I've got 3 apples per monster, so 3, and then times some number of monsters is actually going to give me 12, my 12 apples. And then another way I can solve this is if you want to start bridging that connection to division, I've got my 12 apples. I'm now dividing that by groups of 3. And that's going to give me my number of monsters, which is going to be 4. So you can see how much just from this basic visual puzzle, I'm able to actually link the connection between solving with groups, applying multiplication and division on the exact same puzzle. Students' minds are blown when you start to show these relationships. Okay, we're going to jump on to one last puzzle here. And since you all are a more advanced group based on your responses, I'm going to skip. So every puzzle talk typically has 4 puzzles. The next 2 on here are going to use 2 different puzzles in this section. But I'm going to jump onto our bonus puzzle, which is a little bit harder. And I'm going to just let everyone solve this one on their own and then put their solutions and their strategy in the chat. So again, solve this independently and go ahead and put your solution and how you approach solving this in the chat. And thanks for being such an interactive audience here. We're getting so many amazing responses. Okay. Groups of 6 go to 3 monster. Okay, so we've got 1. Any other folks want to take a stab at how to solve this? This is actually this is really gonna work here. Your schemas here. It's like you can in solving this with other folks, I've intentionally actually confused folks, and it's really a great way to push and extend the thinking using multiplication and division in this game. So, okay, great. We're getting some responses. Let's see what we got. So we've moved 1 apple down to create pairs and then groups of 6. So a lot of folks are really focusing on the groups of 6. Yeah, and also seeing that we could do 18 divided by 3. So to echo, and I just want to notice, and you all can see this from the chat, you can see this from the response to this question, you can see the response to last question. Just notice how many different ways and different responses there are to solving this. Even when some of the strategies are similar, the description, the way it's articulated is totally different. It's one of the beautiful things around using these puzzles in order to get students talking is the range of strategies. It just opens up so many divergent ways of thinking about how to solve these puzzles, which is exactly what we want to do with our students. So as many folks noticed here, we've got where you can get thrown off in this actually is you start to think like, oh, well, there's 3, I guess I have 3 to 1, right? 3 apples to 1 monster, which is 6 to 2. So then you can start to think, well, 18 divided by 3. But what's one other strategy is if you think about this as a ratio of 2 to 6, which some folks noted, I can see there's going to be 2 monsters for each 6. And so this would be my 2 monsters would give me 6 of these, and then 2 more monsters would give me 6 more, and then my last 2 monsters would give me the remaining 6. And so let's go ahead, and like I said, this one can really push at your schema. So that would actually be, so what's happening is I've got 1 monster per 3 apples, or 2 monsters per 6 apples. And really pushes me to start to get at some early rate and proportionality thinking, which is super, super awesome. Okay, I'm going to show you one other. So this is just one puzzle talk of our beautiful Puzzle Talks library. I'm going to jump out of this one, and I want to show you one other one that I really love, and then I'm actually going to have you all break out and explore in groups. So let's just say I'm looking for another talk. And let's say I'm in 5th grade. So I'm a 5th grade teacher, and I'm starting to introduce parentheses, and I'm getting students to look at expressions. And so this one on placing parentheses looks very interesting. I will say this is another one that's going to spark a lot of engagement and deep thought on students' end. So let's go ahead and jump into this here. And you will have to access the Ed console in order to access them currently, at least as part of this presentation. Yeah, so I will ask you to go in and log into your STMath console in just a sec. So, okay, so here's an expression that I have. It says 2 plus 4 times 3. It's got two places I could place this parentheses. And I'm assuming here that it wants me to create this expression so that it's going to match this shape right down here. So I'm not going to show you all the animation with this one. It's going to make it a little trickier. Let's call this 1, or let's call this A, and let's call this B. So go ahead and type into the chat whether you think this is going to be A will be our solution or B will be our solution. And I know I'm asking you just to think about the solution versus share your thinking, but let's start with the solution gathering. So if you think it's A, think it's this one, type A into the chat. You think it's this one, type B into the chat. And we're big fans of trial and error, so it's okay if you get things wrong here, which is on your math brain. I always like to think if you're getting the answer correct, you're not actually learning anything, right? It's so funny with students playing STMath. Oh, kids are doing so well, they're getting it correct. Well, they're not learning if they're getting it correct. You're only learning if you're actually failing. All right, a lot of folks are thinking this is A, and let's kind of draw this out and think about why this might be A. So if I've got, and again, this is where the pen tool can be so helpful. Like, we are teaching math right now. This is explaining and teaching kids how this mathematics works, but doing it in a problem-based context. So I've got 2, and now I'm going to create my 4. And I can see what I want to do here is create 3 rows of this. And so in order to do that, yeah, we would need this shape multiplied by 3 in order to create these 3 rows. So again, such an effective tool in order to help students understand how parentheses work in this case. We'll go ahead and select this. And what's awesome here also is you can also use the animation. So this is one tool I've used very effectively to talk about. You ask students, well, what's happening? Can you see what is the 2 and the 4 freaking out into? And we do call when objects animate from a number into a block, we do call that fricking in our software. That's just a term we've used for decades. Maybe don't use that with your students. That's our internal term. And you can see exactly how, and then I'm going to get this, and then this one will animate out 3 groups of that, and that will give me our solution here. And I'm going to contrast that to the next puzzle here, which I think you all can guess which solution this is going to be in this case. I'm just going to go ahead and select it. And so what's happening here, and I'm going to pause it so I can animate this, is we can see, and of course, multiplication is going to animate first. So I can see first I'm going to animate that 2, and then I will animate out 5 groups of the 2, and then I can see I'm adding on the addition. And this is where the expression or the shape here really creates that deeper understanding of what this expression actually refers to. The fact that I've got 2 groups of 5 and then that added to 3, and how different that is when I put the parentheses around the 3. So. Okay, I think we've talked about enough puzzle talks as a group here. I would like to give you all an opportunity to explore these on your own in groups. So let's actually start. I'm going to give you all 2 minutes just to jump in and explore them on your own. So I'd like you to log into STMath, open up your educator console. You're going to go again to your curriculum menu. You're going to click on Puzzle Talks, and you're just going to start to explore what are some of the puzzle talks that are in there. You can look at one of the ones that I modeled. You can find a different one and think about what is exciting here and how might you use these in your classroom or with your teachers if you're a coach, and bring this in for your students. I'm going to give you all 2 minutes to explore independently, and then I will break folks out into groups where I'm going to have you all talk about what you're noticing, what you're seeing, what you're wondering, what you're excited about, and then we'll come back and debrief as a larger group.
And Kai, I'm going to go ahead and drop in the chat in case folks don't have an STMath educator account. In theory, you all should, but in case you don't, here is a demo link where you can explore just for the day in the STMath educator console and check out the puzzle talks.
Thank you so much, Lindsay.
Mhm.
And I'll just show for anyone that isn't sure how to do this, you can just jump into any grade and it'll take you right to the curriculum menu. And no matter what grade you're part of, when you click on Puzzle Talks, it will link you to the entire library of Puzzle Talks. So that's also what's fantastic is, let's say I teach second grade, I can actually see Puzzle Talks everywhere from fifth grade down to kindergarten. So if I wanted to push my students or if I wanted to do some intervention content, I can have all of that accessible. Okay, I know it's not a lot of time that you had to explore, but of course, the theme of this presentation today is conversations fuel deeper understanding. So we are going to put into action the topic of today. We're going to break you into groups now so you can talk about, again, anything around puzzle talks. What's a puzzle talk you're excited about? Any of your experience with them? What's a question you're curious about? What are you noticing based on the things that I modeled? Just engage and have a fun conversation around puzzle talks with the goal of how can you bring these into your classroom or bring them even more if you already do.